Welcome to the DeFi Standard. This is Patty XRP, and with me is
Mickey B. Fresh.
all right, Mickey. So today we're gonna, with the whole governance proposal stuff that was going on the past 5 or so days, we just kind of wanted to bring it back to something we talked about when you first started the channel, which is why was the original distribution model put into place. So we're kind of going to be covering that in this video, just so people have an idea of like why there's a staggered distribution and how the
Yes.
incentives are lined up, as well as the liquidity and what Flair's original vision was. But
Yep.
yeah, before we get into that, Mickey, you want to hit on something?
Yeah, before we get into that, I just want to say we're not financial advisors. We are not tax advisors. And we are not sponsored by anybody. And nobody has, if from the crypto community, ever given us a dime. And we've never received a dime from any crypto industry participant or entity. For our network, for our finance, we are completely independent and we are not sponsored. So I just want to make that clear to everyone in the community that our opinion is unbiased.
Yep, absolutely. And obviously, we cover the Flare network a lot. And, that stemmed from both of us being XRP holders and then learning about Flare last fall. And, just researching a lot. We like how it's designed. We like the vision of Hugo and his team. And, there's a need for information around the Flare network. So that's kind of what we're filling. And I mean, really, Mickey, we're just sponsored by our viewers pretty much and the people that
Yes.
interact with us on a daily basis. So we do appreciate that in a big
Yes, and
way.
it is a complex network to understand. So, trying to have a high level discussion about something that's very complicated and is very new and has a lot of moving components is very difficult to have unless you know all those moving components and the facts around them. So, what we try and do with this channel is educate everyone based on the facts and the complicated components of the network. And it is complicated, but it's the only way you could really have a high level discussion about a Flare network is if you understand all those facts and those moving pieces. And we're going to dive into that today about the distribution.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely a discussion that's hard to have over Twitter just by the nature of how it's limited and how quick feedback is and all that stuff. So, yeah, in the future, when governance stuff comes up, we'll try and do a good solid job of having like, written opinions on things put out to make it more formalized. I think that'll do good for everybody. And if we can kind of move it in that kind of direction going forward
Mm-hmm.
or help in that way, I think everybody in the community will benefit. But with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and hop into this Flare blog that's called Further Information on the Spark Token Distribution. This can all be found at flare.xyz. Flare.xyz. They have a blog tab up here at the top. And they have a ton of blogs explaining stuff in a different way in the white paper, a little less technical or hopefully easier to understand if you're looking for written information. But to start off here, let's go into their first point is network. Oh, I'm actually at the wrong part for that, Mickey. Cool. So the first one is the fact that the distribution is structure has been designed to help achieve a successful network launch and to provide strong incentives for network participation that builds utility. The first in these points would be free riders and early liquidity management. So it's always been Flare's stated position that the best people to provide capital to underpin the trustless issuance of FXRP on Flare are the people who own XRP. The only way to achieve this fairly is, in our opinion, the distribution of Spark that is taking place. Rather than embracing Flare and Spark for the utility it creates, a certain percentage of people will wish to claim Spark only because they believe that it is free money. To reduce the negative effects from this dynamic, the amount of liquidity that can be put into the market at any one time is therefore limited by the extended unlock process. So, maybe I just want to start there. I think a lot of the argument comes around whether you know is dropping the entire supply before any inflation happens on day one and having maybe more selling pressure in the beginning. Is that the best way to launch a network, or have this possibility of a sustained but lesser selling pressure over the course of a few years? I know a lot of people want to relate that back to, how Ripple releases XRP into the market through the escrow, or like Jed McCaleb dumping his XRP every month. One of the things I will say about that is largely for retail holders, when you receive like or you buy XRP, unless you go and use it in some other DeFi service out there like Kava or OneChain or something that's been around, there's not like a lot of options for you. So a lot of us XRP holders simply just hold XRP. When you're receiving Spark, you automatically have inbuilt risk-free yield, which Hugo stated is one of the main drivers behind the investments that they received from many of their backers that we have covered. And so that's one thing. People will immediately be able to use it straight from, like, let's say their Bifrost wallet or Decent or through MetaMask, and they can earn risk-free yield by delegating a detachable vote, and it'll just keep running that vote continuously until you change it. So there's not a lot to do, but you are earning money from receiving that airdrop. So I think that's one barrier for people to sell. Also, as you move the distribution over a longer period of time, you can kind of think of it as like a marketing tactic almost, where this person's getting pinged with a Spark airdrop every single month. And, before they sell, they have to think, oh, what is a Spark token again? And maybe they see in the market, oh, the Flare network's doing well, the Spark token's doing well, or oh, look, these people that I know are making a lot of yield using their Spark tokens. Instead of me selling it at this point, how about I start participating in the network with those tokens? And then maybe they like what they see there, then they bring more capital over from somewhere else and they start investing in the network. So like, to me, I kind of like the possibility of people getting pinged because they're able to participate as soon as they get the Spark token. And I think that should reduce some of this, like, long-term selling pressure. But Mickey, I'll pass it over to you for thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, you covered many of the things that I agree with. The design here was supported by the big industry VCs who have backed Flare and invested 11.3 million into Flare Limited, right? They support this distribution model that was set up. Now we also have to take into account here, this adds liquidity every month, and it also keeps the exchanges who are distributing out to their users interactive throughout this 2 to 3 year period of the 3% every month. So they're going to be more likely to build products around the Spark token and the Flare network if they're having to distribute out this Spark to their users every month. And we know there are 100 plus exchanges. So I'm not for, just so we're clear here, if somebody didn't see our last videos, we are believers in the original distribution. And also, it's going to be, you have a chance to opt out of the other 85%. If you don't want it, you feel like you incur tax losses, or you believe that, even though we disagree with that, you can opt out. And that 85% that you opt out from is going to go to the general rewards pool. For everyone who mints F assets will receive that. And now those who receive that 3% every month, many of those people are just going to turn around and delegate that right to the FTSO provider. They're not going to take it and sell it on the market. Now, let's also be clear about one thing about the FTSO here. That is going to have an inflation rate of 28 million a day. 833 million Spark per month will be generated from the Flare Time Series Oracle for the first 6 months. 833 million per month. That will be the value that's transferred to the good participants in the network. And that's really important to understand, that this is a mechanism that allows value to transfer to those who are good participants, who are strongholders, are participating in the network, not just the random Jed McCalebs. So that's important here, that 3% is is very little compared to the actual inflation, which is going to go to those who participate. So, Patty, if you want to compare this to traditional markets, we think of inflation as always, oh, the higher supply, it's going to kill the price, but it's actually going to reward those who participate. And that's really important in this network, that it involves participation. And those who do will be rewarded with that inflation and will allow them to compound and earn more Spark and more Spark.
Nice. Yep, that was
At no
perfectly
risk,
summed
too.
up. Yeah, at no risk. That's the big thing
There's
about
no
the
risk
Spark
to your
token
Spark.
delegation.
Hmm.
So yeah, that was great, Mickey, and that kind of reminded me about one of your first videos that you put out on Flare Network, just like, what is Spark doing? What is the design behind it? And I think that perfectly covered it there. But to move on to the next part, and this will hit on the FTSO yield Mickey was talking about. So network participation, incentives, and weak hands. In addition to limiting excess liquidity, the structure of distribution provides much larger rewards for participants that bring value and utility to the network. These can be participants that either already have Spark through the claim or ones that buy Spark from people that decide to sell. The token distribution structure means that the percentage rewards for participating early are the highest they will ever be. The rewards as a percentage then reduce in size over time as the network matures and the token distribution unfolds. This boosted reward percentage is achieved without changing the plan token supply at all. So they're going to touch on how. Basically, you can remember that the FTSO is the beating heart of the Flare network. This is what they call it in the white paper. And this is a system that generates in a decentralized fashion certain price feeds that are important to the network. So that would be like the XRP to Spark price, the Litecoin to Spark price, the Dogecoin to Spark price. They're also going to have Bitcoin Cash to Spark, Algorand, and all these different assets that are going to start off with the FTSO that signal providers will be providing the data directly to it on, basically all day long, 24/7, 365. And so we can see how the staggered distribution delivers yield as a percentage from the FTSO um, at first. And this is not necessarily what kind of yield you will get, but it's rather if all the tokens that are available participate to the FTSO, so on and so forth, that's what the yield would be. So it's taking like a huge look here. But we can see if all Spark was distributed on day one, you would have all the Spark that's ever going to be distributed from the airdrop competing for the same ratio of Spark tokens um, at the same time, rather than 15% being released at launch. And it's competing for the same amount of Spark tokens. So you can see how there's like that dynamic difference. And, we need the FTSO to be highly incentivized because we want people to get used to delegating their votes to the Flare Time Series Oracle. And, providing them with higher yield is certainly, I think, a good way to incentivize that. When more people are providing their votes to a signal provider to go to the FTSO, that means that it's going to be more decentralized, more accurate, and just allow for greater participation. And you know, the Flare network is only as decentralized as its Oracle is, so this is really something that shouldn't be lost and is highly important.
Yes. So this replaces the incentive mechanisms that are typically used in consensus. So David Schwartz has stated that no incentive is the best incentive. But I've seen in the community that's been twisted to apply to other things. He used that in consensus that no incentive is the best. So Flare adopts the same method in their consensus. There is no incentive to provide validation of transactions in the network. There is gas fees for executing smart contracts, but for actual consensus, there is no incentive. So it does stand by David Schwartz's model. But market mechanism design, game theory, and incentives are very important in decentralized networks. These are not businesses. These are not centralized entities. These are decentralized blockchain distributed autonomous networks. They operate by themselves and they have certain governance parameters that are built into them. And the Flare Time Series Oracle is replacing the mining. So the rewards that are generated from the Flare Time Series Oracle replaces the mining rewards that would go to miners. Instead, everyone who's a Spark holder is able to obtain those rewards without having to give up custody of their Spark. And that's pretty powerful because now you could earn these rewards and participate in this decentralized time series Oracle and earn more Spark for doing that. You could also, in certain decentralized applications, simultaneously utilize your Spark, say in Flare Finance, and delegate your vote to the FTSO to earn yield. You might not be able to choose the signal provider if you do that, but you will be able to do it simultaneously. And that's a pretty powerful thing about the Spark network and the Spark token specifically. And that's why it's superior kind of to ETH 2.0. A lot of people say, oh, Flare Network's going to be better than ETH 2.0, but why? Well, this is one of the specific reasons why. And I think it's important to understand these facts because these are facts of the design. And understanding that is important. There's just so many moving pieces. We didn't even get into the general rewards pool yet, which is another component of minting FSX and why FXRP is actually going to be superior to XRP in its utility because it's going to have Ethereum smart contracts and it's going to have a no risk yield. You're only trusting the Flare protocol when you bring XRP to the Flare network. You earn Spark daily. That's a yield you do not get with regular XRP. That is a fact of how it works. And then you get Ethereum smart contract applications.
Yep, that's excellent, Mickey. And I just want to add, so for some clarification on me describing this graph earlier, the reason why this is the yield for it all being distributed on day one. So in option 2 of that proposal, they said that 15 billion Spark would be released at launch, and then there would be no more subsequent airdrops. So that means we would have to take 10% of 15 billion as the new supply, which would be 1.5 billion Spark that 15 billion Spark are competing for. Granted, not all of those 15 billion would be released yet, but just for comparison's sake. And then if you compare that to 15 billion Spark on day one with the staggered distribution, they would be competing for 10 billion Spark. So you have the same amount of Spark tokens competing for a much lower amount in the option 2. So that's just something I wanted to add in there for some clarification. And then we can keep moving
Well,
on. Oh,
wouldn't
yeah,
that
go ahead.
one dry after a while, though, if we only released 15 billion? Wouldn't the 10% of that 15 billion then after the first year dramatically reduce those Spark?
What do you mean dramatically reduce?
Well, if the supply was only 15 billion, right?
Yeah.
And that was the total, right? Instead of 100 billion, they're starting off the network at 10% of 100 billion is the inflation rate that will get paid to FTSO to those who participate. If the total supply is only 15 billion, once that 6 months runs out, now 10% of 15 billion is a dramatic amount lower than 10% of 100 billion. So what I'm saying is the FTSO rewards would decrease dramatically if we only had 15 billion total supply at some point.
Yeah, that's what I
right?
was saying. Yeah, that's what I was
Okay.
getting to.
Okay.
But that may have
Sorry.
been a better way to describe it. So hopefully one of those explanations works for the listeners afterwards. But moving forward, so the FTSO is set to behave from the initiation of the network as if 100 billion tokens were fully distributed and unlocked. So that's how you get the 10% inflation times 100 billion tokens. This means that the number of tokens being minted is the same as if the distribution were to happen all at once. Hence, total supply at the end of the distribution is unchanged. Importantly, because Spark only unlocks as time progresses, an early network participant can potentially earn a much larger percentage return from the FTSO and become a more significant participant on the network by doing so. So like this last part is really big, Mickey, because
Yes.
by the nature of having this higher yield, it means the people that want to start participating from the beginning are going to become larger stakeholders in the network for governance, for utilizing their Spark tokens, maybe as collateral in the F asset system in the future, maybe in Flare Finance liquidity pools. Maybe all they do is delegate their FTSO vote. So it's just saying that like they're trying to get the distribution of the Spark token after the initial disbursement to the people that are participating. And that's how like all this distribution and rewards are set up. And for that, you can see how the token supply changes over time. This is, obviously a lot slower progression after the initial dump. If they were to release it all at once in this line right here. And then also the staggered distribution. Yes, the inflation is much higher on a yearly basis over the first few years, but then it starts evening out once it gets to the top. So you can kind of think of the staggered distribution as like a curve, which Ethereum is a network that's become very popular and done people very well, and they had a really high inflation at the outset of that network. They were having like 25% yearly inflation for the first few years, and so
Can I
I
just
want that something that's not lost on people. Yeah,
Yes, and can I just jump in there with the difference between Ethereum? So that high inflation rate went all to the miners.
yeah,
That went to all the gas fees. That went to all those consensus. They had to have that high inflation, but regular ETH holders didn't get that inflation. It didn't go to them. It went to the miners. And the difference with the Flare network here, and this is the key difference, is that inflation rewards is going to go to all Spark holders. That's the most probably important takeaway. If you're going to take away anything from the Flare network, is that the inflation rewards go to everyone in the network who participates, and everyone has the ability to participate. Now, as Patty was explaining there, Ethereum had this very high inflation rate. It didn't even go to the ETH holders, and it's been super successful. Now we're going to have Spark tokens go to the good participants. So the good participants are going to be stronger, and the weak participants are going to get weaker or sell out. So that's the network would be evolving into a good position where ETH 2.0 is going to be more centralized, and Flare Network is going to be more decentralized in the distribution.
yeah. I'm glad you brought up that point that the ETH inflation was going to miners, because I think that is a huge deal, and it's a lot more equitable for an entire ecosystem for it to go just to the general holders that are participating. So yeah, that's an excellent point, Mickey. And to move forward here, so the staggered distribution model should act as an additional way to incentivize individuals and groups who want to be agents and data providers to Flare, and further incentivize them to participate sooner rather than later, as they have this opportunity in the beginning with less of the supply being out there to earn more significant rewards. So, like, when we throw it all out there at once, then there's less incentive for people to start using the network more quickly. So this was one of the things, like, we talk about bootstrapping, like this is a huge part of that. And not leaving the blockchain just out there to fend on its own. They're trying to guide basically how people will interact with it through the distribution and through the FTSO inflation rate. So yeah, it's a different model, and it goes away from the scarcity aspect of some other cryptos, but it's not like it's the only blockchain platform that's used inflation to get their network going. So to me, like, obviously not everybody's going to agree that this is a good way to do it, but just like from what we've been covering this entire time, like, we feel very strongly about it at this point. The Flare team, I know that Hugo didn't say it as much on Twitter with his proposals. Maybe he should have, but if you go and talk to him in their telegrams, he says that they feel very strongly about their original distribution plan. He even went as far to say, like Mickey was talking about, that their stakeholders, their investors, are really excited about the built-in yield through the FTSO, and then also with the distribution model that they came up with. Yeah, sure, you can ask why did they put that out there. Absolutely a fair criticism. So
Yeah, I'll just jump in there and throw that. I didn't agree that that was a good thing that they put out there. So I just want everyone to know, like, I don't think it was a good thing that they put out there the three options. So we weren't the biggest fan of them putting out the three options. And I'm very happy, and I think Patty is too, that they pulled back those options, because that was kind of a little the governance really doesn't apply till the network goes live. So those votes really wouldn't have taken place till after the network went live. So if somebody was going to sell, they would have sold out their governance votes. So I think it was a little premature, and I'm very happy, and I think you are too, Patty, that they pulled back this, and the initial distribution will go on as is. People could put forth governance proposals. In the future, you will need a super majority, which is 66%, and a minimum of a 50% turnout to change the distribution. And now this will happen after, if anyone wants to put a proposal out, Flare won't, Team won't, will happen after the network goes live. And now that will eliminate anyone who opts out will not have, if they sell, they won't have their votes as governance. So they won't be able to vote. So all these voices on Twitter is kind of, it's not really accurate because some people have a lot of votes and they don't speak on Twitter. They don't say anything. And a lot of people have loud voices on Twitter who won't even be part of the governance. So it's hard to say by Twitter. I think is a very poor representation of how the actual Flare community truly feels.
Yep, absolutely. And I do want to add, so like the main gripe is them putting it out before the network launched because I don't think a lot of people understood that you can't actually vote till you get your Spark tokens. And then they're like, well, why can't we vote on the initial distribution? I'm like, well, there's literally no way to do that equitably. So like the Flare team needs to decide the initial distribution. Now, what I will say is like let's say we get, 3, 4, 5 months into the staggered distribution and maybe it's not playing out as well as, Flair team thought or like what me and Mickey think or anybody else in the community, and we get to a point where like what, maybe we should have no more supply entering via the distribution and just through the FTSO, and we should lower the essentially the yield from the FTSO by just making this the full distribution at some point in time. We can bring that proposal forward. We can have discussions in the community about it. So to me it just doesn't make sense to handcuff us right at the beginning of this timeline when we have this model that the Flare team worked hard on. Like let's just see where it goes, and if things aren't working great within 6 months, we can certainly change it if we want to, and people's opinions can change. So I think that's the beauty about this is we don't have to make these predefined decisions all the time. We're going to be able to get some data, see how things are working. Let's see, like the stakeholders that come out, like agents, signal providers, as they become more known, will they be able to put out information around things that can help? So it's just,
I also want
yeah.
to add in there the Flare Foundation is going to be putting out reports and will help guide the governance.
Yes.
So the Flare team hasn't brought them out yet. So we have yet to see the Flare Foundation guide the governance. That's all coming. So there's a lot of loud voices on Twitter saying they want to hate on Flare and this or that. You know what? They're the creators of the network. They designed it. They're putting it out there for us. You didn't invest any money into Flare. They didn't do an ICO. Nobody invested any money. So honestly, in reality, everyone can have a right to an opinion, but you're all getting something for free. So you have to keep that in mind too. And they're building this for you. It's your ability to earn yield on top of it, and you're getting these tokens. So we do have to be a little respectful here. And some people don't understand why, but everyone is entitled to their opinion. There are just louder voices on Twitter that maybe not have as much of a stake, but they want to twist things to their opinion. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Cool. Yeah, and just going back to the point that the parties or individuals that will act as agents and data providers. So from that sentence, these parties will bring value and utility to the network, and the distribution model aids development and decentralization of the ecosystem. Beyond being an incentive to generate utility on Flare, the staggered distribution should also provide a strong incentive for interested participants to absorb excess liquidity from sellers. So this last point is talking about if we have the ability to continually earn and people are going to sell off this staggered distribution as it happens, the people that want to stick around and understand this, they're going to be more likely and they have a strong incentive to absorb that excess liquidity. So they may be more likely to purchase the Spark that's being sold because of the staggered distribution. So I think that's an important point. And like this is going to be like Flare is trying to create very much like an economic system that's a blend between institutions and retail. There's certain things that are going to be more enticing for retail to use or, act as a liquidity provider or provide collateral. And there's going to be situations where it makes more sense for like a professional institution to do so. The agent system is probably at first going to comprise more of institutions just due to the complexity of providing Spark as collateral. But, I'd be surprised if we don't see somebody come out with an application that allows individuals to manage that. The issue is really just being able to meet the demands that are happening on like a per minute basis whenever there's like changes to what, the collateral ratio or like the price ratios of the assets, or also you need to return XRP to somebody that wants to redeem it. that's something you need to be able to do on demand, which right now, that right at the start of the network, we're not going to have great options as Spark holders to do that more than likely, unless you want to go through one of those like institutions. But that brings into like custody issues and stuff like that that you have to consider. But I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yes, and the other side of that is the minting of F assets will begin 8 weeks after the network goes live. So that's considered a Spark dependent application. And that's why that is not at launch. That was never planned to be done at launch. Spark's volatility has to come down, and that's an application that is governed by the Spark holders. So, like the Flare Finance DeFi ecosystem and protocols is governed by the Y Flare holders and YFin. Trust lines and probity is governed by TCN. The F asset system is special because it'll be governed by the Spark holders. The parameter changes will be done by the Spark holders. So it's a special application, but it's not really at the protocol level. It uses the Flare time series Oracle, but minting of F assets can be done in a decentralized way through your Bifrost wallet or through Decent or other wallet providers. And speaking of Bifrost, didn't they come out with a security audit today, Patty?
Yes, they did, and I'll do a brief video on that later as well, just kind of covering the highlights and what you need to know from that security audit. So we'll get into that. But Mickey, so the last kind of thing I wanted to touch on here is basically the F asset pools. So we know that there's going to be a general F asset rewards pool, which will be XRP, like, or sorry, XRP, Dogecoin, and Stellar at the beginning, and then Litecoin has their own dedicated rewards pool. And these rewards pools, as soon as the F asset system goes live and a threshold of F asset value is minted for each pool, they will deliver daily Spark to you just for having minted F assets. And this actually brings me to another point that I just wanted to bring up about, people dumping the Spark token. Well, every person that mints an F asset on the Flare network ecosystem, well, they're actually providing more like support for the Spark price, because you have to have 2.5 times the value of the F assets being minted in collateral as Spark. So that's going to be locking up a lot of Spark to do that, which should have upward pressure on the price as more F assets are minted. And so somebody just holding Spark actually is not doing as much for the Spark price as somebody that is actively participating in the network by minting F assets. And I don't know who this was that was in the Flare Telegram proposals group, but when I saw them write that, I was like, honestly, that's a really good point and a good reminder that, not everything in this network applies directly to, other networks that have been created before in the same tokenomics around them.
Yes, this is, I think, really a fourth generation network in its design. And I know some people have said, Cardano is a third generation. Well, this design really does come as a fourth generation because it has new mechanism designs in it, and it doesn't use the consensus to reward. It uses the Flare time series Oracle. But those general rewards pools that Patty describes, you can you could make an analogy to those as like Ripple's escrow. That's what that is. That's kind of like an escrow that's algorithmically distributed to those who participate by minting F assets. It's another type of participating. It's different from the FTSO participating. It comes with a little more trusting of the Flare protocol. You have to put your XRP on Flare, but you're not trusting any entity. There's nobody custodian your XRP. It's trusting just the protocol and its design. And I think that's important. And you get rewarded daily in Spark. And then you turn around, take that Spark and delegate it and keep compounding. So this is the mechanism design that's really important in the Flare network. But if you don't know all this stuff and you try to have a conversation or argue about it, it's very difficult to do because you're leaving out many pieces.
Yep, absolutely, Mickey. And just kind of to touch on, since this is in general about the distribution model, I do know that one of the other worries about having a staggered distribution is that there could be tax implications, and people are assuming that a lot of the whales that would have these tax implications would be in the US, where that's the most unclear area on what the deal is going to be at this point. However, I mean, I'll add in like people that are whales probably, that have tens of millions or hundreds of millions of XRP, like they probably know how to handle their taxes and will do it in whatever way makes sense for them. I don't think we should just assume that a large majority of the Spark holders are going to be US based, especially if you go based on trading volumes of XRP and things of that nature. So I wanted to add that in there. And then I also know, like, so David Schwartz was tweeting about how he thinks from his experience that letting the entire supply out at the beginning is the best way to go about it. But my only question, and I guess in response to that, which I mean it's fair if he has that opinion and he definitely has experience. My question would be then why would we, Ripple continually use the escrow for the XRP ledger if it has those kind of negative effects that he was alluding to? So that's something I don't know the answer to, but I think it's a fair point to bring up in regards to that. Cool. Well, Mickey, that's pretty much I think we have all to say. Do you have any last things you wanted to hit on?
The last things I just want to hit on is I think I encourage everyone to look deeper into Flare before just sometimes listening to voices out there. It is very complicated and it's not something you're going to understand in a day or two. It's going to take time to really understand it. But to have a true, honest discussion about it, you have to really understand all the facts. And I do encourage everyone to read the blogs, read through the white paper. If you read the white paper 2-3 months ago, read through it again. You're going to be getting these free tokens for owning XRP. So you really should make the effort to learn as much about it. We still have a couple weeks till the launch. Nothing has changed on the Flare Network's design. They're still the same team. They built this. So, everyone's opinion will be their opinion, but the network is still the same. Nothing's really changed. It's all the same as it's been set up to be. So I just want to give everyone that reminder. There might be a lot of talk and a lot of, some negativity here, but nothing has really changed. You'll be able to opt out. If you don't want the rest of that 85 distribution, that's fine. You opt out. Throw that into the FS rewards pool. So everyone who mints F assets will go and take your Spark. So that's fine if you want to opt out.
Yep, I think that's a good way to sum it up there, Mickey. And definitely no love lost. If you got to sell for whatever reason, taxes, personal issues, I mean, everybody's got to do what they got to do. And we'll move forward with the people that choose to stay in the system long term. So,
yes. And let me just throw one other thing here. I think it's important to note that the Flare community is going to become their own community, and the XRP community, some people will overlap into it, but not everyone will. And that's okay. It's understandable. There will be some people from the Doge community, some from Stellar, some from Litecoin, and that will make up, and XRP will make up the Flare community, but there won't be full overlap. And that's understandable. So I just think we should have those expectations going forward that not everyone is going to be a full believer in the Flare network, and especially at launch. So that's just something that we just have to accept, and you're never going to convince everybody.
Yep. And I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion about the OG distribution model for the Flare Network Spark token. This is the DeFi standard. I'm Patty XRP, and
I'm Mickey B. Fresh.
we're out.